If somebody falls into your lap in the second or third round that you had a high grade on, I absolutely would take them.
The Las Vegas Raiders select Brock Bowers.
Tyree Wilson, Max Crosby.
I was really excited about yesterday, don't get me wrong. But today, with some of the value that is on the board.
My gosh, I'm just so excited. NFL Draft Week is here.
Here we go. It's day 2, and we're excited. It's our live pre-draft roundtable, and we want to thank America First Credit Union. We're live on all platforms, and what an exciting show we got lined up for you coming up. Ashton Genty will join us, Deshaun Reed, Paul Gutierrez. We got a whole bunch of guests that we're lining up. We'll get you going for the next couple hours here and countdown to the second round of the draft. And EA, it's always best available day.
Yes.
Now yesterday it was kind of easy but unique because we were waiting for the pick.
Right.
But we only had to really keep an eye on 8 or 9 players that would probably be here. Today, it opens up in the second, and let's not forget the third round.
Yeah, we understand that the second and third round are opportunities for the team to figure out, hey, I can go and get a player that maybe has a first-round grade, but we get him in the second round, and he's going to be a starter for us, or at least really push whoever that position is. It's really important today. I mean, this is really where the team is built on the second and third round, in my opinion. And it's just great to be here. We're in a great facility, back in the facility again. Although yesterday was amazing, right? We had a great time yesterday, but I love being back in the facility where I know where everything is.
Well, you're teasing because there's been a big day in this building. We got a lot to share with people. There's some legends rolling around.
Yes.
Everybody seems to be here, which is great. And you made a very good point about there's no doubt going to be a player that the Raiders take that they have a first-round grade for.
Yeah.
That's what you do. And the Raiders are picking early in the second round.
Yes.
So you got to assume the player they're taking has a first-round grade or very close. It's just a question, as John Spytek was asked, is it best player available or is it an obvious need?
Yeah. And you have to be able to, with this football team and the pieces we have, it really has to be about need. And that's where you come down to you're figuring out, need-wise, is it a skill position? Is it here? What's going to help us get this offense or defense to a point where we can walk on the football field and know we're going to be successful? And that's the most important thing about evaluating, and the player personnel people. Had a long talk with a couple guys today, and they were just really talking about this is an important day to really build this football team and get players that at the end of the year we're going to be excited about them. Maybe not like Brock, but still very excited about what they're able to do for our football team.
We're going to spend a lot of time talking about Ashton Genty, who will join us a little bit later on in the show. But the comparable for him, when you hear Marshawn Lynch, I know you got an opinion. Here's John Spytek and Pete Carroll.
Well, I'm glad you brought him up because he'd been calling all evening here about it. He's pretty fired up about it. And, there's nobody loves the whole running game more than he does. And the style, the guys that have style is something that's really special to Marshawn, I know. There is similarities in that his ability to make plays when it doesn't look like there's anything there. Marshawn did that, throughout his career, and he found a physical way to, kind of bank off of people and bounce and just keep alive. And Ashton really is a player that shows that kind of style. That's one of the aspects of his style, his burst and all of the other things he does as well, complement. But there's a special makeup in there, in Ashton in particular.
Love the comparison to beast mode as we bring in Paul Gutierrez here from the Raiders. And Paul, exciting times here. Let's begin with Ashton Genty, from the pick to what happened over the last 18, 20 hours with him getting in the building and what that's been like.
Yeah, thanks, guys, for having me again. Last night's draft pick from the Raiders' perspective, it was that rare occurrence where you found that intersection of best player available and a position of need. And they didn't overthink it. They went and they struck and they got the guy that they needed. And that really, for the first time in over a decade, I would say, and I wrote this on Raiders.com, you had pretty much unanimous of approval from fans to draftniks to people that have been following this team for a long time. Now, I say that with a caveat because you can't really truly judge a a draft class for a couple of years, but when it comes to their first pick of any draft, you'd probably have to go back to 2014 with Khalil Mack to see the last time that everybody was across the board excited and looking forward to it, because there was always questions along the way. Now, some of those draft picks were great picks. We saw that with Brock Bowers last year, but in terms of the initial knee-jerk reaction, we saw that. So and you see him when he arrives today, and you have those legends you were teasing about earlier. All 3 Super Bowl MVPs in the building and welcoming him and taking a photo with him. And I talked to Marcus Allen, and Marcus Allen said that when they're out there taking it, it's Marcus Allen, Jim Plunkett, Fred Biletnikoff. And the 4 of them are out there, and Marcus Allen told me that he told him, hey, this might be the 4th one right here. So that means that the Raiders have to win a Super Bowl, and that Ashton Jeanty has to be the MVP. But lots of good feelings, lots of good vibes around the building today.
Man, what an amazing picture. We have a photo up of Marcus, Jeanty, Plunkett, and the great Fred Biletnikoff. And you come into this building, and these are the kind of players that you're around. And for him, he's just probably such a humble guy. But when you're talking about today's game, and you're talking about defensive coordinators, the first thing they're going to think about now is how do we stop Brock Bowers? And with that combination of the running game and Brock Bowers, Paul, how do you think that's going to go?
It's interesting because I talked to all 3 of those MVPs as well to get their unique takes on it. When I talked to Marcus Allen, I'm sure you'll ask me about Marcus in a minute. But in terms of when you have a star running back like that, from a quarterback perspective, talking to Jim Plunkett, he said, yeah, that's a quarterback's best friend, because if he can run the ball, that sets up the play action. And a quarterback, his best friend there is that you don't want to be in 3rd and long. If he's getting chunks in the 1st and 2nd down, it makes 3rd down more manageable. So he loves it. From a receiving standpoint, I asked to the Hall of Famer Fred Biletnikoff, and he said, yeah, if you have a running back that can catch balls outside of coming out of the backfield, that's only going to open up more opportunities for receivers down the field. So he's looking forward to seeing what he can do in that aspect. And from Marcus also, I mean, again, he was so happy when he came walking into the meal room downstairs, and he saw Ashton and just yelled out Deuce, because that's his nickname. And as he came walking over, he told him, you have no idea how happy I am that they selected you.
There's another guy I was with today, Max Crosby, and I walked him into the lobby, and Max was he couldn't believe that the Raiders have him and he's going to be a teammate, because he's so excited about what he can bring to the team. And, Paul, we spent a lot of time with Geno Smith yesterday. Yeah. This is huge for Geno. This is exactly what the plan was, kind of put in place with John Spytek, Tom Brady, Pete Carroll, to get that player now, another offensive weapon day one, that could help Geno Smith in the play-action game. And now the Raiders on 2nd and 5, where a lot of teams want to pass, this kid might be able to pick 8, 12, 15 yards up there and keep the defense, Max Crosby and his teammates, on the bench a little bit longer. That could be the difference in a lot of games in the 4th quarter.
Yeah, they'll be a lot fresher and have a lot more juice and a lot more energy. And again, in my conversation with Marcus Allen, I'll write this for Raiders.com early next week, and I'll tease a little bit here. I don't want to scoop myself here, but what I thought was interesting, the way that Marcus, because I talked to Marcus, and obviously there's the Marshawn Lynch comparisons. Yeah, he's 3 inches shorter and 5 pounds lighter than Marshawn was when he was playing. And I asked Marcus, I said, you're a totally different player from what you were. And he said, obviously, because you can see in that photo how tall Marcus is in relation to those guys. But he said what he loved about Ashton Jeanty and watching him, and throughout the season he would reach out to him and talk to him, give him some inspirational talks, was that he was never out of control. He was in total control of his body, and that made him able to be deceptive in his speed. So when I asked for comps, and I said obviously it's not fair to compare a guy coming into the league to somebody that he reminds him of, but he did say this: he had the balance of Barry and the power of Emmett. And I think those are guys in the NFL, running back-wise, you don't even need to know what their last name is.
Yeah, that's right. And that's kind of where I come up with the comp is Emmett. He was nimble, but he could run through you. And then there was aspects of his game in Emmett that he could take it to the house. So he was a complete football player. And when you look at Jeanty, just the ability to be able to go into every football game knowing that you're the guy. And you're going to have to line up against 8 guys in the box and still be successful. Just have a lot of respect for Jeanty and how he's getting it done. Talk to us a little bit about how you think Chip Kelly is going to work with Ashton Jeanty.
Yeah, there's a reason that when Ashton Jeanty walked into the building, he was met by, yes, of course, the GM, John Spytek, the head coach, Pete Carroll, Guess who came up and gave him a big pound and a big hug there at the end as well, JT? I'm sure you saw it too. Chip Kelly. So they're all excited about having a new toy, so to speak, in the toy box. So the way they're going to use him, the way they want to use him, is the way that he was used at Boise State. But in the NFL, obviously, like you mentioned at the very top, opposing defensive coordinators, their job is to stop him. So if you can get those chunk yards early on, throw him the ball out there in the flat when things are breaking down the field, that's how they can use him. And that's how, Ashton Jeanty is already familiar with Chip Kelly because he went on a recruiting trip and visited when he was coaching already out there, so at UCLA. So there's already a familiarity there, and there's a respect level there as well. So they're going to just have what he's already done and just try to fine-tune that going forward.
I'm fascinated about Raheem Mostert. I truly am. You're going to be hearing me talk about this a lot on the radio because he's 100% healthy. And when he was healthy a couple of years ago, he led the entire NFL in touchdowns. And we're looking at Ashton run here, and look at his speed on the next level, running away from corners. But then Mostert, who we got to assume coming into camp will be at 100% ready to go. Matter of fact, there's going to be a couple other running backs in that running back room that are going to be fighting instead of for 10 or 15 touches, Paul, if they make the team, maybe only 2 or 3, maybe only 3 or 4. How do you think that works with the style of what Chip Kelly will want to do? Because he had 2 1,000-yard backs that worked really well at Ohio State.
And that's exactly what this offseason program is about, right? As soon as the rookies get ready for rookie minicamp, we'll see exactly what that vision is, what they can do, what's expected of them. So they did not invest a top 6 pick in Ashton Jeanty to have him come in and sit on the bench. Obviously, there's a learning curve. And, natural talent is going to shine through. But again, as my conversation with Marcus Allen pointed out, you saw it there in that highlight. As he was running away from people, it didn't even look like he was running that fast. It didn't look like he was putting in a lot of effort. And boom, he was gone. And that's what Pete Carroll talked about last night was there was also a comparison to Reggie Bush. Not in style of play, but in that when he would break off those long runs, Pete Carroll would watch those highlights of Reggie Bush from high school or from USC, and he'd say the TV, he'd be the only one on screen because he'd run so far away from the defenders that were chasing him. And the same thing with Ashton Jeanty there. You saw it. Doesn't even look like he's putting much effort into it, and boom, he's gone. So that's something that Marcus Allen spoke about as well. That's something that Chip Kelly, they're going to have to figure out exactly how to integrate him into that system because you're right, Raheem is a different style entirely too. So again, I go back to this whole fascination of thunder and lightning type backs. Maybe that's exactly what Chip Kelly can see there and how he can put it together because Pete Carroll already has that experience going back to his USC days with Reggie Bush and Lendell White.
I think it's extremely important with the length of the season to have 2 backs that can get it done. And unlike the years when you were playing 16 games, I mean, this is a long season, particularly for a young player coming out of college. I think this is a perfect fit for a running back who can do it all also, right?
No doubt. And you were mentioning earlier about the depth of the room, and somebody we haven't even mentioned, Zamir White. He was the starting running back coming into the season last year until some injuries nicked him up, and opposing defenses kind of figured him out a little bit. But he's a guy that runs very hard. You've got the multifaceted of Dylan Laube as well, who was drafted last season and dealt with some injuries along the way. So they've got a fascinating tailback room. And making it even, sprinkling a little bit of that Chip Kelly dust on top of it makes it even more intriguing. So that is going to be one of, if not the biggest storyline from the offensive side of the ball, besides the quarterback, is exactly how are you going to use this group of running backs going forward?
That is a very good running back room.
Yeah. Yes.
All of a sudden, because you have Ashton Jeanty.
Yeah.
And everybody's looking around going, when am I going to get my touch?
Right.
Well, we'll see. It's competition, Pete.
That's right.
Competition to see what happens. Finally, Paul, your opinion on John Spytek. You had a great interview with him after the first round today. It's always best available day, as I call it, man. But the Raiders, as EA and I say, they need starters. They got to get out with 2 starters today, maybe trade up, trade back. What do you sense could happen today from talking to the GM?
Yeah, he was just looking forward to just getting more picks on the record, right? But then you start talking to people around the building, start talking to people at the top of the building to find out. And while they're excited about the Ashton Jeanty pick, there's still a lot of boxes to check throughout the rest of the day today and tomorrow as well. Cornerback is a huge need. A receiver is another need. Linebacker is another need. So if they can somehow get, trade back to get some more picks, that wouldn't shock me at all, especially tomorrow. But if they really like the cornerback from Michigan today, they're probably going to have to move up because they do have the number 5 pick today to start the day. But he may be gone there at number 5 if he's their guy. So there's that. There's the receiver position. Those are the two positions I'd keep an eye on today. And not, day one, there's always that anxiety, that anxiousness to get going. Now it's about business. And I think, Eric, you said earlier, this is really when the draft starts in terms of building rosters, because you always get that first-round pick, and that's where the excitement is.
Yeah.
But day 2, day 3, that's where the grunt work begins, and that's where teams are made.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to be talking to Lincoln Kennedy here later on, and I need to have an offensive lineman somewhere so I can get Paul to help us out a little bit so Lincoln won't be on our case.
Yeah.
Any offensive linemen that we could possibly look at?
There's no doubt that they need to get, address that as well. But the offensive line last year was starting to come together. Now, you can kind of pencil in a starting offensive line right now, Colton Miller situation notwithstanding. I don't know how to exactly explain his situation, but yeah, I would say that especially later today, tomorrow, I would look for offensive linemen there. Okay. And Lincoln Kennedy will be very, very happy at that point.
Yeah, and lastly, Paul, before you jump out, I just got to tell you, Luther Bird in the third, the wide receiver out of Missouri. I mean, some teams might not need a wide receiver, and the Raiders do. If he's available, I think he's a wide receiver 1. I mocked him as a 1 first-round guy if he can get him. And then I've really been looking forward to a linebacker around here.
Yeah.
But not a linebacker in a system. I'm just talking about a guy you look at and say, 3-down linebacker, going to be there. He's going to be a starter with Devin White on day 1. Get him in there. And I think linebacker is a really important position, as you mentioned, Will Johnson, if he could be there from Michigan.
Yeah, and that's the key, right, is building this team on day 2, day 3. And those are the foundational pieces that this team needs to really focus on. And again, whether it's the wisdom of Pete Carroll having done this for so many years, or John Spytek doing this in this chair for the first time ever, that to me, again, is one of the more fascinating things. And one of the cooler things, actually, about what John Spytek is able to do, having paid so many dues to be in this position, because there are, in talking with people in the building, excited again about the pick yesterday, but the real work, rolling up the sleeves, that really begins today.
Thanks, Paul. We'll talk to you later today. Great work as always.
Thanks, buddy.
All right, coming up next, they say we have Ashton Genty.
What?
Yeah,
in the building.
Ashton Genty, he's in the building. Oh, he's in the building. He's got his family here, so we can't wait to see what he has to say as we continue. We're excited about today. Today, you roll up your sleeves and you hope you get a big-time player, too. We'll see what John Spytek wants to do with Pete Carroll, but Ashton Genty is coming up next on our pre-draft show.
It's game day, the day we've been waiting for. And this is more than just a game. It's a passion, a lifestyle. Here at the Raider Image, you're part of our team. Whether you're in the stands or cheering from home, we've got your back. Feel the confidence, own the game.
We
are the Raider Image. Your game, your gear. Exclusively at the Raider Image.
He sees those double teams all the time with the great gunners in the history of the league. Mostert takes off and goes the distance for the touchdown. So the Patriots defense sees Mostert pull off the biggest run of the night and go 43 yards.
outside zone, and then both touchdowns come on inside zone plays. Watch the double team inside. Robert Hunt came off and got the linebacker, and Mostert goes untouched into the end zone.
Raider Nation, on this episode of Microsoft Breakdown, Raheem Mostert, the explosive running back for Las Vegas Raiders. Raheem is a definite, bona fide, big-time playmaker. This guy can straight up go. Here we get a little bit of motion. It's a split zone. Watch him hit that hole. Split the safeties and onto the house. That's the kind of explosiveness we need from our guy Raheem. I love the fact he's able to split the safeties and run away from those guys. We haven't seen that type of explosiveness in a long time. All right, here we have Raheem in the backfield. But hey, third down, you got to be able to be in the passing game. Maybe as a protector, but I want a guy who can spread out and catch the ball. Outstanding job here. I lined up as a receiver on the outside, gets past the first defender, slows down that little window to give the quarterback a great target, goes up with his hands and gets it. If we run this back, two things I like here. He slows down to give the quarterback an opportunity right here, and then all hands. And look, the safety's trying to hit him. He falls out of bounds. That's an outstanding play of being versatile in our offense. He can line up in 11 position, 11 personnel, split him out. He can be a part of the running game and the passing game. That's it this time on Microsoft Breakdown.
And with the 44th pick in the 2024 NFL Draft,
Getting right to it.
The Las Vegas Raiders select guard Jackson Powers Johnson from Oregon.
Interesting they announced him as a guard. Yeah. Played center, but at his size and his frame, you can absolutely play guards.
Raiders called me. I was super surprised. I had no idea that they were going to draft me. They barely talked to me, pre-draft, and just a bunch of joy just rushed to me, and yeah, I got drafted.
You know, he was only the 5th Oregon player to be a unanimous All-American. Like, this guy can play.
You have a big interior blocker here in Powers Johnson.
It was just so surreal. I went out of my body and picked up the phone and was just shaking and trying to hold back crying. So
thank you for supporting us, believing in us, and staying loyal to the Silver and Black. It's all hands on deck this season. We're putting in that work on the practice field, but we need you to stand up and show out. See you week 1. Raiders.
Best running back in this draft, one of the best running backs I've seen since Saquon Barkley.
But what happened when Genty rushed for 300 yards? What is his stock going to do?
Genty picking them up, putting them down.
A draft filled with talented running backs. This young man is the clear favorite to be the first one off the board.
Let him eat, and they did.
Well, how about that? As we're ready to roll and we have him in studio, the Raiders' new running back, Ashton Genty. Congratulations and welcome to Raider Nation.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, what a whirlwind. I mean, I just want to talk about being on stage with the commissioner, Lambeau Field. Next thing you know, you're in Las Vegas. You got Fred Biletnikoff, Jim Plunkett, Marcus Allen there. What an experience. How's it going?
Man, it's going great. I mean, so many things happening fast. I mean, I felt like I was just on the stage and I blink and now I'm here, So, but it's all good, man. I'm loving it.
The fan base there in Wisconsin, what was it like? I mean, was it just kind of craziness?
Oh, it was crazy for sure. They said it was 200,000 people. When we got on the stage, I'm looking out and I just keep seeing more rows and rows of people.
Yeah,
it's nonstop.
As everybody talked about where you were mocked to, and we were hoping that you'd be there, and then the Travis Hunter move in Jacksonville and all that. I mean, you're focused and you're sitting there ready to be called, but that was really unique, those first 3 picks and 4 picks before it got to you at 6.
Right, yeah, and I think, I'm not going to lie, once we kind of got to the Browns and, I didn't get no call from that one, I'm like, hey, I'm finna be a Raider, baby.
That is awesome, man. Well, Ben, you're a professional football player now. Talk about all those folks who kind of poured into you, helped you out, helped you get here, your family at Boise and all those players. Talk to us a bit about what that journey has been like.
Man, it's been a long journey, but, it's been amazing. I've loved every second of it, getting here. There's been so many people that helped me along the way. I mean, coaches, teammates, mom and dad, brothers, sisters, siblings, aunties, uncles. I mean, I could be talking all day about people who helped me, right? But I'm just so thankful, to be here. And then, the most special thing I think in the moment was to be able to share it with all my family, and a lot of different people who've invested in me and helped me get here today.
I want to stay on that. Family means a lot to you and your background and how you grew up and how you worked through adversity in life. Let's stay on that for a minute and your immediate family and how they helped you along the way.
Yeah, so mom and dad. Mom's a teacher. Dad was in the military. So gotta have good grades and for sure gotta be disciplined. Make sure you're doing something right. But not only that though, just a great foundation, but just supporting me in each and every way. They're here right now with me today.
Awesome.
So, they've always been along for the ride. And then, all my siblings, I got an older brother, older sister, younger sister. You know, they've all been so supported. And, you know, those are like my best friends, you know, built-in best friends, you know, growing up. You got to share everything, do everything together.
Yeah.
So I'm just so thankful for my family, and, you know, family's everything for me.
That's so important. Talk to us a little bit about when you first start to think about yourself in this position on this stage in the National Football League. I mean, was it something you expected, like when you were younger, high school, college? What was the deal?
Yeah, I think once I started playing football, I was about 11, 12, and I knew it could be something special. But what was crazy is I always had people telling me, like, hey, you're going to be professional. I've never seen anybody like you, what you're doing. And, you know, I'm just thinking, all right, whatever. Like, I'm pretty good, but, you know, once I got to high school, that was when it kind of, you know, really settled in, and, you know, I could kind of see the bigger picture of, you know, me getting here and then kind of focusing in and, you know, locking in and really taking it serious.
I was up at the Mountain West Championship game in that cold game as you won and went to the playoffs. And I want to spend some time with your Boise State family. That was a big moment, not only for you personally and your teammates, for the fans to deliver a college football playoff and what that meant to the program. What a great way to go out.
Yeah, that was great. I mean, you know, that's what we talked about all year. I mean, in the start of January, you know, with the new landscape of college football, we knew we had a chance to do it, and, you know, we could be the first team potentially. And, you know, we put that in the back of our mind, but, you know, we didn't look too far ahead, and, you know, we took it one day at a time. But to, you know, be one of the leaders of that, and, you know, do something so special, you know, for the fan base, the community, I mean, Boise State, I mean, it's never going to be forgotten, you know?
Awesome.
Yeah. Boise, as you know, I'm from the West Coast, and Boise's always been that school that had those players that, man, there were going to be 3 or 4 of them that you knew when they got to the league, they were going to take care of business, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
talk to us a little about that journey. If anyone from the university kind of helped you and schooled you on what it'd be like to get here.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of different guys. That's the cool thing about Boise State. There's a great alumni presence, and I'm hearing there's a great alumni presence here,
The
too.
best here. The best here.
So, I've seen a little bit already talking to Marcus Allen.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so there was a lot of different guys. I mean, from when I first stepped on campus, I mean, you know, J.L. Skinner, he's playing for the Broncos, Scott Matlock.
I coached J.L.
Yeah?
in high school,
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he was, you know, also talking trash to me at practice, but after practice, like, you know, sitting down and talking to me and, you know, saying, you know, how we're going to need you, this different potential. George Halani in the running back room, probably one of the most important relationships that I had because, you know, from when I first stepped foot on campus, he, you know, was like a mentor. He took me in. I mean, he's showing me plays, teaching me up, you know, helping me. So to have that brotherhood, and I mean, there's multiple other guys. Alexander Madison, who's, you know, just playing here too. He's been reaching out a lot. So I've been grateful to, you know, have all these different, you know, players, former or, you know, current, you know, while I was there in my corner.
The whole thing that's going forward now with Pete Carroll, we spent a lot of time with Geno Smith yesterday. He was at the draft party. He was pretty excited when the pick was made to play now with Geno, but Brock Bowers, the offensive line you're going to get going with coming up here. It just feels like you're the new piece that could get this offense really explosive because, you know, Max Crosby and that defense on the other side.
Yeah, real exciting. I mean, like you touched on, there's a lot of great pieces that they have. So I'm glad to, you know, join the attack and, you know, be an instant asset for this offense and this team.
What's the process like for a running back when you're getting prepared for a game? You know, that's one thing I understand, you know, studying receivers and offenses, you know, but what's the process for the running back, like going to game? Do you worry about the contact? Do you worry about kind of what the defense is trying to do? What is that process on game day for you guys?
Yeah, I think, you know, the way we did is you took it by situational. So, you know, going from, you know, mixed downs, you know, 2nd and long, 3rd and long, 3rd and short, 4th and short, red zone, high red zone, low red zone, right? And then, you know, what type of defense are they playing in these situations and, you know, breaking those down and how we're going to attack that, right? And then just me personally, I watch every guy on the field, you know, how they tackle, You know, whose tackles are going to be easier to break, whose are going to be harder.
There you go. Oh, so you look up the corners. That's what you're trying to say.
Oh, yeah,
you're
for sure. We love corners. But, you know, like, because, you know, a lot of times in the run game, right, there's going to be, you got to know which one or two guys you got to make miss or, you know, break the tackles from to, you know, make those big plays. So that's really where my analyzation goes. And, you know, I feel it's very detailed. You know, it has to be, especially, you know, when the defense knows you're going to get the ball, right? So you got to be a step ahead and, you know, not really going off instinct, but kind of knowing what's going on before it happens.
All right, last one. Here we go. Raider Nation. I mean, this is massive for you. We're so excited because you're going to get to see. You saw the alumni today. How about this building?
Amazing.
Amazing. And now the fans, you're going to settle down. This is going to be your home. What do you want to say to the Raider Nation and these fans who are just so excited to welcome you?
Man, you know, in the same way the fans are excited, I'm just excited. I'm already loving Raider Nation. You know, I can't wait to make so many memories and, you know, have such a great presence in the community. And, you know, I've scored a few touchdowns in the stadium, so hopefully a lot more coming soon.
Ashton, thanks for doing this.
Awesome,
to your
man.
family and everyone else, thank you so much. And it's been a whirlwind. Enjoy the rest of the day and especially the weekend here in Vegas.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, so that's Ashton Genty. When we come back, Deshaun Reed will join us from The Athletic. And we got a lot more to get to today, pre-draft show, as we get you ready for the second and third round and the direction that the Raiders are going in. It's been exciting. It's going to get exciting today. We'll tell you all about that as we continue on our live pre-draft roundtable.
Respect comes down to one thing, and that's respecting yourself.
Yes, we're here for our Elite Academy. It's our third year we've been doing it. Really fun program where we're getting kids out to be in the same building our players are working out in. They get a little character development work in the team room with some alumni, some players. They're out here working on drills, things like that, doing some 7-on-7 scrimmage work. So yeah, just a fun day to develop, learn, build some camaraderie with kids throughout the city, and it's fun. With girls flag football, obviously it's grown a lot in the last few years. When we started this program a couple years ago, we had maybe 15 and 20 girls who came out, and now we're up to over 130.
Is a program that the Raiders put on and invite quite a few different high school, junior high school, elite offensive and defensive linemen out to practice their skills, to learn from a few different coaches, some new skills and techniques that they can take with them in the future and hopefully propel them to the next level. It's nothing but an incredible positive for the entire community, and definitely a positive for the young athletes, just to have such a powerful entity willing to spend time and give them time in the facility to better themselves. It's gotta make you humble as a young player and make you even want to do more and be a better young athlete, no matter what phase of athletics you're in.
I love it, man. Matter of fact, when I walked in the locker room, I thought I was going to start crying.
It's fantastic. It's a beautiful stadium.
gotta execute.
Do you think that Ashton Genty is a comparable to another player in the NFL right now? Can you give me a comp?
Well, look, it's hard to give. So me and comps, I always feel like this little asterisk there because you don't ever have like the comps to like you give these lofty comps because you don't want to give one that seems medium. But like he has a style that's like LT light, like, you know, obviously that's a very, 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 we worked with him, LaDainian Tomlinson, and, you know, that's a very lofty comparison. I'm not suggesting he's like already Canton bound, but I think he has that style and type of running situation. And if you're a fantasy football player, you would absolutely want to put him on your team this year. You would have no worries about him being a rookie. So I again, asterisk,
with caution,
like, but just go in that, that mold, that type of player, transformative for sure.
Welcome back to the pre-draft show as we continue along with the future Hall of Famer Eric Allen. I'm JT. Tashawn Reed joins us from The Athletic. Great to see you on an exciting day around here.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, got to meet the new running back today.
What'd you think?
It was good. I mean, you know, we got to talk to him a little bit last night. You heard a lot of good things about his character off the field and kind of who he is as a young man, and I think that lined up with, you know, your impression of him just from a press conference. But, you know, we all know what he can do on the field. Really difference maker in the backfield, almost broke Barry Sanders' record. I mean, speed, athleticism, power, vision, balance. He's a good receiver as well. I know probably pass protection is probably the only really blemish on his game, and that's something that they believe he can get better at as well. So, I mean, he was the true best player available at 6. I know there's some debate about the, you know, perceived value of the running back position, but, I mean, you look across the league, you know, last season, Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, an old friend, Derrick Henry, they look like difference makers to me. Now, obviously, you got to surround those guys with some other things on offense in order to free them up to be as impactful as they possibly can be. But it's still a work in progress, you know. First-year regime, they're still building it out, but I think he's a great starting point.
I think the one thing we've seen last year is this going back to that late 90s kind of football where there was balance, and those teams that utilized that balance were the football teams that were there in the end with the running game. I think this is a great opportunity for him to go along with Brock Bowers, right, to be in the middle of the field and kind of dictate to football teams what you're going to do. Because if I'm your defensive coordinator coming off of last year, your first thought is, how can I stop Brock Bowers? Now to have that running game like involved with this football team, I think it's going to be just great for him, right?
Yeah, and I think that balance is something that this offense has lacked the last few years. Maybe they be, you know, good at passing the ball, but they struggle to run, or they're good at running, but they struggle to pass. And now you're hoping, if you're the Raiders, to kind of have that complement of Geno Smith, somebody that can push the ball to all 3 levels of the field. You have a weapon in Brock Bowers, another one in Jacoby Myers. And then you have the big threat of Genty in the backfield. Now, I do think they could still, you know, use another weapon at receiver and probably could continue to invest in the offensive line as well. That was a unit that you have a couple promising young pieces, but you know, until the very end of last season, the results weren't there for you. So there's still some work to be done on the offensive side of the ball, but you can start to see the vision, you know, along with what Chip Kelly is doing as a new offensive coordinator. So I think they're starting to put some pieces together there, and you know, we'll see if they can get that more balanced attack that they're aiming for.
You got a big presence at The Athletic, and I just was watching some of the draft coverage, college game days back at Lambeau. Everybody's still talking about Shedeur, okay? And Shedeur in this building's unique because Tom Brady worked him out and they're friends. The Raiders needed a quarterback before Geno. How have you covered the story of the evolution of Shedeur? Now he drops to the 2nd round, even though the Raiders have Geno. This is a big topic nationally.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of people, it's surprising to see him still available at this point in the draft. I mean, you know, not to say that mock drafts mean anything, but most of them had him going in the 1st round throughout the entire process. And you even see a guy like Jackson Dart, who until late in the process wasn't really thought of as a 1st rounder, going before Shedeur Sanders. And, you know, I think for the Raiders, even with them having Geno Smith, you know, he's going to turn 35, I believe, later on in October, I think, this year. And they're still in the market of adding a developmental quarterback. You know, we have our answer for right now, but, you know, 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, you want to make sure that you also have that bridge to where, you know, if Geno, you know, retires and move on or whatever it may be, you're not just left with no plan at quarterback. And so I think still looking at a guy like Shedeur Sanders or even a Jalen Milroe from Alabama, I still think that makes sense. And we'll see, if he's still on the board there at 37, if they would consider it. I think he's a guy that, despite falling to the second round, it doesn't mean he can't play all of a sudden. I think he has a lot of the traits that you like in a quarterback: accuracy, composure, pocket awareness, smarts, and so you mentioned that connection to Brady, and he knows him very well and has known him since he was a kid through his father, Deion Sanders. So, I think we'll see him go at some point here, early on in the second round. I'd be surprised if he falls much further.
Yeah, without a doubt. Second, third, fourth round, you're having great players. This team understands that also. It's kind of where you land and what you do when you land there. So is there any measurable things that we miss with Shedeur?
I mean, I think he's, unlike his father, who's a crazy athlete, it's a little bit weird, but he doesn't have those kind of exceptional physical traits. He has a good arm, but not a great arm. He can move around, but I wouldn't call him mobile. He's not taking off and running for 20 yards against NFL defenders. And so he doesn't have some of the, he's not the biggest guy. He's not 6'5", 240. He's more like 6'2", 220. And so he doesn't have those, this is a traits-driven league, especially at quarterback, and he's not a Josh Allen. He's not a Patrick Mahomes even. He's not one of those types of guys that kind of jumps off the page physically. It's more about the mental side of the game. And I think, when you're playing at a smaller school like Colorado or even earlier his career at Jackson State, you have some questions about, can he – he was good in that conference or at that level, but can he do this at the NFL level? And so I get the questions. I'm not saying that they're unfounded. And it also sounds like there's been some reports about how he performed in the interview process throughout the cycle, at the combine and on top 30 visits and things of that nature. And so that always factors into it. So again, I don't think that takes him off your draft board. But when you're talking about a first round pick, particularly at quarterback, you pretty much have to be fully sold on that guy to take him because you're going to be hitched to him moving forward.
I think a lot of people are going to regret this. I do. I'm not saying he's a fit for the Raiders or not. I think a lot of teams are going to regret that they went by him and that they don't take him again. I hope the Raiders take Luther Burden III out of Missouri. I really do. And because Will Johnson, whatever happens, if they take him, that'll be a great need here. But I think he's the last wide receiver one available who put up really good numbers over here, all first-team SEC. That's enough for me. And I'm not saying he's better than Jacoby Myers, but you can just put him in as a day-one starter. Because, Deshaun, I'm looking at a day-one starter at corner or wide receiver, and to me, he's the best available receiver.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I went to Mizzou, and I'm from St. Louis, so I'll try not to be discussing him. But I do think he has a lot of potential. He's a guy that can line up at different spots. He did a lot of his work in the slot at Mizzou, but he also can move outside as well. He's also a guy that makes a difference as a returner, which is another position they need for the Raiders. And so I think he can make an instant impact and can help round out that receiver room. As I mentioned, they have a couple pieces between Jacoby Myers and Trey Tucker's flash as well, but I still think they need another receiver. I think we talked about this during free agency. I would throw out Higgins as well, receiver, coming out of Iowa State. He's more of a bigger body guy. He's like 6'4", 6'5", 220, so he's more of that traditional X receiver. So it kind of depends on what your flavor is, whether you prefer Burden or him, but either one I think would be a great pickup there. And I agree with you. I mean, you look at the biggest needs remaining: receiver, cornerback, and then I would also throw out linebacker as well. And as we know, John Spytek, he loves the trenches, and so even if it's not a perceived need, you can never, question drafting a good offensive lineman or defensive lineman. So I really think they go anywhere at 37.
That's great where you guys both are, but with the coaching and the GM we have now, do you believe size would be the difference? Because we know he wants a bigger corner, right? Mm-hmm. We need a bigger receiver for red zone opportunities, in my opinion. So you could have two receivers or a cornerback who are there, but if the size is, not equal, then you go with the bigger guy, just to have some diversity maybe in the receiver room or the cornerback room. Yeah,
I can see that. I mean, I think Burton, he has a lot of those same similarities to Jacoby Myers and how they're used. Like I mentioned, they both line up in the slot a lot. They both are kind of Z receivers, the move guy a little bit. And so, I know Jacoby's going into last year's contract and you have to plan for the future as well, but at least for this year, it would be a little bit redundant. And so Higgins, I think, is probably a cleaner fit. Just from where he lines up positionally. He is a true X receiver. He's not as versatile, in terms of he can line up in the slot, but he's not going to do as much damage there as Luther Burden. But you may not care about that with having Jacoby Myers and even Brock Bowers, who also lines up often in the slot. And so, like you said, it kind of depends on what your flavor is and what you want. If you want that traditional X receiver, big body, Higgins needs to be your guy there, I think, at 37.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this because there's going to be 3 or 4 players the UCLA linebacker. We were talking before we came on about the linebacker position, and I'm just trying to figure out, the organization finally got one that we really liked, and we didn't want to see him go, and he ended up going because money was there. And you look at, how do you fill that need? And I'm talking about a linebacker, that could go sideline to sideline that doesn't come off the field. But I'll ask you, Deshaun, you know Pete Carroll's going to make everybody compete. So if you're a rookie coming in to play linebacker, you're going to be competing against a veteran or someone at that position. That's an important need, and I think right now, with Spillane being gone, to me it's a massive priority from leadership and also a guy who can just get in front of people and tackle.
Yeah, I agree. And this isn't the deepest linebacker class, so it's not perceived to be. You never really know. But Carson Swearinger out of UCLA, I think he's probably the guy you look to as the best available linebacker. And he is one of those three-down guys. He's kind of that prototypical modern linebacker who can cover, can stop the run, he can blitz, he can kind of do it all. And Chip Kelly actually coached him at UCLA. Yes. He was the head coach there. He wasn't playing then. He hasn't really grown into this player that he is until later on in his career once Chip had moved on. But he still knows him well. He knows the character of him. And I think he'd be a guy that, at 37 would also make sense. I think kind of getting a trend here. There's a few guys that make sense. And I think that tends to happen when you have as many needs, I think, as the Raiders do right now. But I think Swearinger, obviously, like you say, you got to come in and compete with guys like Landon Roberts and Devin White. But could be another guy that could be a day one starter. But I think the good news for the Raiders is you may not know what they're going to do, but there's a few guys there that you can look at and be like, he's a day one starter, and I think that's a good position to be in at 37.
Yeah. How many corners are left that could help this football team on day one? We talked about Will, and we kind of know his situation. And outside of that, what are the corners, we could see, again, thinking Pete Carroll, what that defense is going to be like. You probably want someone who can play both press and off, zone and man, so he has to be a combo guy. What do you think about those corners outside of Will?
Yeah, so I'll try to throw a little curveball at you. I know thinking about traditionally you think about outside cornerback, but nickelback I would also say is a pretty big need after losing Nate Hobbs in free agency to the Green Bay Packers. And a guy that really fits that Pete Carroll mode of defensive back is Nick Emmanwori out of South Carolina. He's mostly been a safety during his college career. He's got a 6'3", about 220, ran like a 4.3, 40-yard dash at the combine. But he not only lined up at safety, he also lined up at nickelback a lot at college. And I think that's a guy that, while you obviously have Isaiah Pullamau and Jeremy Chin at safety, there's nothing wrong with having a big nickel. A guy that's 6'2", 6'3", lined up in the slot there. And that's essentially a starting position now in the modern NFL. And Patrick Graham on defense, he basically uses a 4.25. And so that's a guy that's going to always be on the field pretty much. And so while he's not traditionally, a cornerback, I think playing that nickelback role is just as important. And then maybe long-term, in a year or two, maybe he could kick back to safety and take over there.
You nailed that because of how versatile he was and what the Raiders need with Nate Hobbs gone. And I think the fact that you just give Pete Carroll, Will Johnson, or you give him just some player that you can move from a safety. You think of Cam Chancellor and what we saw with some of those guys who played in the box. And then Jeremy Chin comes in, and you assume he would be a starter. But I saw today on your social media on X, the players that got waived. So there are players leaving as new players come in. And I'm a big believer of covering Pete Carroll's career in Seattle, that he just wants another piece on defense. Give me a safety, like Harbaugh does and what they did in Baltimore yesterday. They already have an All-Pro, a Pro Bowl safety, and they got another one.
Right.
And I think if you give Pete just another body that can line up, and I love what you're saying about versatility, just move him down as a nickel, move him closer to the line of scrimmage. That's what Pete's been great at.
Yeah, I think you just give him talent and let him figure it out, especially on the defensive side of the ball, with them having a versatile mind, not just in Pete Carroll, but also Patrick Graham. We've seen him be adaptable throughout his entire career. He can pretty much adjust to whatever you give him. You know what I mean? So Malcolm Kuntz is a good example of that. Like, he isn't traditionally the bigger, body, edge rusher that Patrick Graham uses, but you saw that 2023 season, you kind of use him more as that kind of 3-4 guy, and he had a big season. So I think you just add talent on the defensive side of the ball and go from there, and I think every GM in the league at this point is going to say that they're taking the best player available. You're not going to say that you took the third best player, right, when you come on the clock. But I do think genuinely, like position aside, the Raiders are just going to take whoever they believe to be the best player available at 37, whether it's considered to be an obvious need or not.
Yeah. What room out of all the positions that you think after this draft is over today has to be stronger going into the season?
I'd say cornerback, and I kind of group together outside and nickelback within that. If you feel good about the outside guys, I still think you need a nickelback. If you feel good about the nickelback, I think you need at least one more outside guy. I think that's a position I mean, I guess you could, but I don't think you can really come out of the draft without getting a guy that has starter potential there. And so I think that would be really a top priority for me, really as soon as, 37 and coming into today. I think if I have a evenly rated cornerback and an evenly rated linebacker, I'm going to go with the cornerback just because I think they really need that position to get firmed up, just in the modern NFL, but especially in this division in the AFC West and all the good receivers and good quarterbacks out there.
Offensive coordinators.
Yeah.
Tell our listeners and viewers where to find you and what you'll be doing throughout the draft, especially live coverage, which is what you're really good at, too.
Yeah, so I'm on X and Blue Sky at Tashawn Reed. Also subscribe to The Athletic. Come over and read our coverage there. And then I also have the Just Win podcast with Ted Nguyen and Vic Tafer, who are also writers at The Athletic. So we'll be covering the draft all the way through tomorrow, and we'll have some stuff for the next couple of days after the draft as well.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
That's Tashawn Reed, everybody. He does an excellent job. Follow him on all of his social media. And when we come back, we're going to dive back into it again. Lincoln Kennedy, some of the guests that we have, as the Raiders will be on the clock soon, early in the second round. They'll have a third-round pick, too. So we got a lot of coverage live from headquarters here. It's our Draft Roundtable, Day 2. We're excited to have you.
It's game day. The day we've been waiting for. And this is more than just a game. It's a passion, a lifestyle. It's time to suit up, Raider Nation. This is Raiders football, where we all bleed silver and black. It doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. Here at the Raider Image, you're part of our team. Every hat, every piece of gear. Let your loyalty show out. Whether you're in the stands or cheering from home, we've got your back. Feel the confidence, own the game.
We
are the Raider Image. Your game, your gear. Exclusively at the Raider Image.
Comes through again for the Raiders. Mayfield, boy, feels the pocket collapse, and they keep coming. Mayfield lit up again. Adam Butler starting to work up a lather for this defense. Second sack of Mayfield.
Raider Nation, welcome back to another episode of Microsoft Breakdown. On this episode, we're going to take a look at defensive tackle Adam Butler's 2024 season. Adam Butler, once we saw him in training camp, talked so much about, hey, you guys just think I'm a pass rushing tackle. I'm not a pass rushing tackle. I can do it all. Look at the spatial awareness here. Run him down, tackle for a loss in the backfield. One more time, let's take a look for all you young guys out there trying to find out how to play defensive tackle in the National Football League. We're going to find a way to use our body to be able to separate between the guard, get down, get low, get dirty. Does a great job of getting in, causing a tackle for a loss. He deserves a lot of credit. Had a really strong season. He's a really veteran leadership type of guy in the locker room. But not only that, when you look at the technique, what he's trying to do, he blends that great strength. Look at that, bull rush him right back and to the quarterback, provides that great strength, the power to speed, all those things you need to do to provide that depth for this defensive line of the Las Vegas Raiders. That's it this time on Microsoft Breakdown.
We are here at the Lion Habitat. We have a partnership with them, and we come out at different intervals. But today we have a special event going on with the Raiders. We are launching our Raiders Library card. We are here doing story time, promoting the habitat, promoting the Raiders. We've got some crafts on the other side of the habitat, and we're just engaging with our community.
These guys are native to Central and South America, and they can live for very long, about 60 to 80 years.
Well, of course, the library is always promoting literacy, the more they read, the better readers they become, the better writers they become. We love when our community partners join that mission with us. It's really, really important to know that the kids know that the grown-ups all around them are supporting them.
If somebody falls into your lap and the second or third round that you had a high grade on, I absolutely would take them.
The Las Vegas Raiders select Brock Bowers.
Tyree Wilson, Max Crosby.
I was really excited about yesterday, don't get me wrong. But today, with some of the value that is on the board.
My gosh, I'm just so excited. NFL Draft Week is here.
Welcome back to Raiders Roundtable. It's round 2 and 3. We're excited about it after Ashton Jeanty. There's a lot to talk about today. Thanks for joining us on all Raiders platforms, and we're ready to go. The Raiders are on the clock, and it's going to be a really big pick. Mike Jones is kind enough to join us, the national NFL writer from The Athletic. And Mike, first off, I wanted to get your opinion on Ashton Jeanty. A lot of people thought and had a mock there overall. You covered his career. You saw him almost win the Heisman Trophy. What do you think for the Raiders?
No, I think it's a great pick for the Raiders. Obviously, there was, questions. Would they go quarterback? Would they go offensive line? I think that Jeanty was a big get for them. I think he's going to have a big impact for them in year one. I'm not going to go overboard, but I think that we'll see a similar impact for, the run game is having a resurgence. We saw last year what Saquon Barkley was able to do, take the Eagles to another level. We saw what Derrick Henry was able to do, what Josh Jacobs is doing in Green Bay. So having that workhorse back and somebody like Jeanty that you look at him and it's hard to find any weaknesses. I think that he will be great for that offense. Yes, we'll see what they do. They've got some young offensive linemen, but they could use some more. But he'll take pressure off of Geno Smith. He should fit well with what Chip Kelly likes to do. He likes to run the football. So I think it was a good start in the draft for them.
Yeah, for sure, Mike. That resurgence last year of the running game with all these football teams, Jonathan Taylor going off. He reminds me, what is your comp for Ashton Jeanty?
It's hard to say. He's kind of got a little bit of everything, and that's why, you kind of think of Barkley. He's not quite just like him, but the way that he can help you in a number of ways. Obviously, running the football, he can, help you in the passing game as well. He runs with explosiveness. He's got, power as well. He's just a really all-around back and probably one of the guys, that we're going to see for a long time in this league.
Mike, I got to ask you about Shedeur. It's just fascinating. I don't know if he's going to be a good fit for the Raiders or not, but whoever gets him is getting him in round 2 instead of round 1, where he was mocked as high as New Orleans at 9, or maybe a trade even going up, and then he drops out of the first round. He's going to be taken probably, I think we'd all agree, somewhere early in the second round. What did you think about him overall coming into the draft, and how surprised were you that he's still on the board tonight?
I didn't ever hear anybody gush about him, but everybody I talked to, for the most part, felt like he is going to be a solid quarterback. I did have one talent evaluator who thought if you get him, let him sit for a couple years, he could wind up being similar to Jordan Love. Other people kind of said maybe more like a Teddy Bridgewater. He is accurate. It's hard to totally project what he's going to be because he was playing behind a really bad offensive line. He needs to get the ball out of his hands more quickly. That's why I think that him sit for a year, kind of learning the pace of the NFL, would be good for him, help his development some more. I only heard from one coach who really was down on him. So, we'll see where he winds up going, but I think you're going to get a guy that I know people talk about his attitude. Is he arrogant? Look, he's Deion Sanders' son, so he's going to have some bravado to him. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't respect the game. He came to Jackson State, elevated that program, went to Colorado, elevated that program. Is he a finished product? Absolutely not. Can you work with him and develop him? I think so. So I think that a team that's got a veteran quarterback would be a good situation for him rather than somebody having him start from day one.
Well, let's talk about those measurables for him, things you can measure, see, study on film. Did the weakness of the offensive line really affect some of his measurables as far as being a drop-back quarterback, staying in the pocket, not moving up and moving back, those kind of things?
Yeah, I think what the weakness of the offensive line, one thing that it hurt was he had to wait for things to develop. There are two ways that you can compensate for a weak offensive line: is getting the ball out of your hands very quickly, or doing a lot of freelancing, doing a lot of scrambling around to buy time, holding on to the ball a little bit. He's trying to make something happen. You can't do that in the NFL. You could get away with it at Colorado, but in the NFL, where you've got pass rushers who are, 6'7", 6'5", 300 pounds, who are running 4.40s, 40s, you're not going to be able to hold them to the ball. So, he did take care of the football. Didn't throw a lot of interceptions, but the arm strength wasn't there. The athleticism, he's not a crazy, phenomenal, athlete. When you think of like a Lamar Jackson, that's not, who he is. But it doesn't mean he can't be a quality quarterback. I just think it's got to be the right situation. They have to have the right plan, because if you have the right guy in his ear and someone to learn from, he can kind of compensate. He can learn how to get rid of the ball more quickly. Josh Allen was a guy that people really had questions about his accuracy. Didn't think that you could actually fix that. Now, after, all this time, he's one of the most accurate quarterbacks. He's an MVP quarterback. Lamar Jackson, people thought, oh, he was just a running quarterback. He is actually one of the most accurate and one of the leaders in passer rating. So if you have a guy in the right situation, he can develop. So I don't think you should look at Shedeur and say, he holds onto the ball too long. He's going to do that here. He's not a crazy athlete. I don't think that the book is closed. He's not a finished product.
Mike Jones joins us from The Athletic. Mike, what do you think of Spytek, the new GM, along with Pete Carroll? I mean, this is interesting for the Raiders. Brand new regime, and I'm sure you wrote about it or talking about Tom Brady's influence and what could happen here. When you take a step back and look at the Raiders compared to the last couple of years since they've come to Las Vegas, what do you see?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think this draft will tell us a lot. They got some guys last year with Brock Bowers. You got a center, you got a tackle, some young guys that you can build around. Now you just need to add to that. And yes, obviously, Tom Brady, from everything I hear, very influential in their decision-making process as they're adding talent. I think it worked out great for them that they got Pete Carroll and not Liam Cohen. This is a team that needed guidance. You needed somebody who'd been there and done that. And I think that Pete Carroll can kind of help get them on track. He obviously has got energy. And so I think that him and Spytek together, Spytek being in Tampa, they have had a lot of consistency there. I think it's 4 straight years they won their division, 5 straight years of making the playoffs. He has learned under Jason Light on how to build a franchise and how to have good depth and draft well. So I think that you've got the pieces there. You've got the leadership in place to be able to build. It's just going to be interesting to see how quickly it all comes together.
Well, these guys have had an opportunity through free agency and their first pick in the draft to kind of build this team in the way that they want with Geno. Now with the running back, you bringing over a speedster at running back from Miami. Do you think they're trying to lay the groundwork for being a power football team?
Yeah, because I think, when we look at what Chip Kelly does is he runs that football. And that's looks like they are getting running backs that can do a little bit of everything. So you've got, Genty, and then you've also got some speed that goes there. And you have Geno, who, look, when he was at his best, Seattle had a strong run game. They had balance, and so I think that you're going to see the same type of balanced approach, same type of physicality. They're going to try to hit you in the mouth, set a tone, and that's, going to be a good, I think, recipe for success for them.
All right, Mike, I want to ask you, because I know you're in Kansas City and you're covering the Chiefs draft. We talk about the AFC West all the time and how tough of a division this is. The Raiders are really thinking, I thought corner was going to be an important aspect of this team. And some mocks had Will Johnson going in the top 10, maybe the top 13. He wouldn't go that far. And now any issues about his health, his knee, his speed overall. He's a Michigan man. So is John Spytek and Tom Brady. And the Raiders have a need at corner.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because, again, they have a number of directions they could go. If you get a guy who's got a first-round grade and he slides down to the second, and you feel good about his measurables, you feel good about his medical reports, then you're basically getting 2 first-round picks. So that could be a great situation for them right there, to be able to, yes, you added a cornerstone with your running back in the first round, then you add a cornerback, because look what you got in the division. You got Patrick Mahomes, you got Justin Herbert, you got Bo Nix. You need a quality cornerback to shut down some of these, explosive passing attacks you're going against. That would be a smart move, I think.
Yeah, this young man was the defensive MVP of the national championship game a couple years ago, has great measurables. Hopefully he's able to overcome these issues. And because he wears that number 2, it reminds a lot of us of our guy, Charles Woodson. So do you see him in a situation where he could get drafted in the second round by the Raiders and be able to kind of get healthy, and then we can see this guy and be so versatile as a football player?
Yeah, I think that if they were to draft him, it's because they felt confident about, because look, these guys, they've started this process. They got their doctors that had their hands on these guys and poked and prodded and did every kind of medical examination at the combine. Then they have follow-ups and things like that. So if they were to take him, it's because they feel confident that he can reach back to a full strength and can be the impact guy that we saw in college, but on this level.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up with second-day corners overall. That's, we got a guy right next to me who's going to the Hall of Fame this summer as a corner, but I always tell him those young corners, when they come into the league, man, going up against these 6-7-year veteran receivers who might be going to the Pro Bowl every year, it's just hard. So, Mike, I just wanted to get your big picture on drafting a corner or a safety who's young in the second round, third round, and then trying to get them to match into an organization. It works in Baltimore. It works in certain teams have a DNA to bring in a player. The Raiders had that here for decades, but it hasn't worked as well recently. What do you think about that overall on getting that day 2 or 3 corner and just letting them compete to start? Because Pete Carroll only cares about competition.
Right, exactly. When you think about Pete Carroll, what he did in Seattle, he always had a strong secondary, right? And so I think that if you get a young cornerback, he's going to be positioned to succeed. One great thing I think about football now and in these college offenses, they are throwing the ball a ton. So these young quarterbacks are seeing all kinds of passing attacks. They are not, coming from a level where they only run the football and they don't get a lot of, they're going up against top matchups every single week, seeing every kind of passing concept there is. So I think that's why when you look at the Eagles last year, they had success with young cornerbacks. You mentioned the Ravens. There are teams that definitely get their young cornerbacks and they put them out there and they're ready to go. And so, again, Pete Carroll's got a track record of positioning young defensive backs for growth and elevating them throughout their career. Why couldn't you do it again?
All right, look at that list, DA, as we saw it. I think the Raiders are in play there. I think all teams are in play. I mean, when you get a corner that can start or play, it's just such a tough position that you want to develop it quickly. Other times, you let guys grow into the position. Mike, as we wrap it up, I want to get your opinion on the AFC West. Raiders beat Denver 8 in a row, 4 years in a row until last year. Most people think the Raiders play Kansas City as tough as anybody in the league. They really match up with them, and Kansas City is just a great team. And then we have Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers, and I like what they did now with their running back room is really strong, and they got a quarterback who's a franchise quarterback. Handicap the AFC West if the Raiders improve, which we expect under Pete Carroll, and how tight that division still is.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, obviously Kansas City is the gold standard. Until somebody knocks them off, they are still the favorites to continue to dominate that division. But you do kind of feel like everybody's kind of starting to gain some ground. They're figuring things out in Denver. Obviously, Harbaugh has been good last year for the Chargers. What's the next step? What do they take? Does Bo Nix in Denver, does he continue to elevate? The Raiders right here, they're hitting the reset button. They've got to try to make up some ground right here. They might be behind in their process because obviously the Chiefs are there already. The Broncos are taking steps forward, and the Chargers are taking steps forward. So the Raiders are trying to catch up there. I feel like, though, if you have a good draft and they've had kind of good free agency, they can compete. It's a divisional competition where lots of times you can throw the records out the window, and it's going to be tough physical games. So we'll see, but it's going to be interesting. Obviously, again, they've got to get out there on the field and improve it, but it seems like they're getting the right pieces in place.
Thanks, Mike. We really like your work. Great job. Continued success. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, my man.
Thanks for having me.
You got it. Mike Jones from The Athletic does a nice job there. As we went around the division, a recap of Ashton Genty, best available players, all of that. Lincoln Kennedy's going to come up in a minute. Oh, we know what he's going to say.
Oh, yeah.
We got the running back. Now let's get someone.
Get some guys to block for him up front.
Yeah, and that makes sense too. But EA, what we've been talking about is there's still starters out there.
And I think that point that you made is we need to get a starter today.
Yeah.
Or at least someone who's going to come in and really battle for that starting spot to make whoever starts even better.
We need 2 starters today.
Yes.
But the one thing, and I said I'm very cautious with that now, Pete Carroll doesn't want to hear. He wants to hear competition.
Yes, he does.
So if you're a starter already in this building,
you better be ready.
You better be ready to go. When we come back, Lincoln Kennedy will join us as we're on all Raiders platforms as we're excited about the draft coming up. Day 2 is exciting. A lot more players available, and the great ones are going to go quick. As we continue on, Lincoln Kennedy joins us from Raiders headquarters as we continue on our pre-draft show.
I love it, man. Matter of fact, when I walked in the locker room, I thought I was going to start crying.
It's fantastic. It's a beautiful stadium.
Gives the run just a yard. It's Devin White.
Man, you remember Devin White back in Tampa? He was the speedster creating havoc everywhere. But watch the speed when he takes off. And I really think what he does best is rush the passer.
Yep.
When they use him to get after the quarterback, he gets there in a hurry.
Raider Nation, on this episode of Microsoft Breakdown, Devin White, linebacker for our Las Vegas Raiders. When I talked about veterans, some of the evaluation is a little bit different. It's about your net up, how smart you are. Here, we're disguising what we're doing. They drop out in Tampa, too. And that puts so much pressure on the linebackers. What an incredible interception. When we go back here, here's what we're thinking. Linebacker, I'm on the line of scrimmage. I have to cover 15 to 20 yards deep, and the quarterback has the advantage in this situation. So it shows me the smarts that he understands the route combinations, and watch him curl right underneath this deep stop route. In all hands, outstanding interception by our linebacker, Devin White. So he's going to be a really good guy in the film room, in the locker room, and making plays like that on the football field. Love to see that. Well, hey, when you're playing linebacker, it's all about how many times you can get in the backfield and get a tackle for loss. Really love this play here because a lot of alignments, you got to kind of understand where you are. And if we stop it here, he's keying that guard. So if that guard disappears and goes left, he has to follow him. But you have to have the athleticism and the speed to be able to attack that hole and go ahead. The guards are gone, and I'm going too. He's looking through the guard to the running back. And that guard goes, it's going to give him a key. Okay, I'm going to follow it. And to be able to beat that tight end coming down to block him, man, what an amazing play. What a smart play. Big time by Devin. Gets it done. That's it this time on Microsoft Breakdown.
It's game day, the day we've been waiting for. And this is more than just a game. It's a passion, a lifestyle. Here at the Raider Image, you're part of our team. Whether you're in the stands or cheering from home, we've got your back. Feel the confidence, own the game.
We
are the Raider Image. Your game, your gear, exclusively at the Raider Image.
we're here to win. We're here to do this thing the right way. We want to lead the right way. I want to be a big part of the culture here and just doing the right things and really just leave my mark on my teammates, on the team, and the organization.
I'm here for a reason. Happy to be in the silver and black. Ready to go out there and again be a part of the community, meet all the fans, go out there on the field and just be excellent.
I'm going to be the guy that's going to give every single thing that I got, and that's every single day. I'm never going to let up. I'm going to do whatever it takes to go out there and win. The work starts now. I'm looking forward to it, and it's really going to be exciting.
You're playing in the AFC West, and that is not an easy division, and it is specifically not great. This is a Patrick Mahomes isn't going anywhere. Justin Herbert's not going anywhere. The Broncos have now made the playoffs with Bo Nix, so it's not getting easier here. So start with the trenches. You already have Max Crosby as the anchor of the defense. There's a lot of smart things going on in the defense. Like, give the O-line, just give the quarterback a chance, because I think this coaching staff can make magic happen. You just need to help him. Trenches are huge. Even though we saw Geno be good under a bunch of pressure last year up in Seattle, don't make the man run for his life.
All right, we are back live on the pre-draft special, day 2, which we're really excited about. What a list of guests we've had so far, and insiders, and now the great Lincoln Kennedy on our broadcast team is kind enough to join us. So, Link, you slept on it last night. We had Ashton Jeanty here. What a great young man, really excited to be a part of the Raider Nation.
Really looking forward to seeing the young man go. But in order to make that happen, we're going to go back to square one, guys. We'll talk about the basics. Get that offensive line addressed. Now, look, there are still some capable starters. Look, there were 8 offensive linemen that were taken off the board in yesterday's first round. There's still a ton of good players. And I just heard the segment you were talking about earlier, right before we came on, talking about a day 1 starter. And so I think that can be a focus for the Raiders in day 2, right here with the 2nd and 3rd round picks.
All right, let's go with your top 3 offensive linemen on the board right now.
Top 3 offensive linemen still available. I'm going to go Tate Radledge, guard out of Georgia. Big man who's can hold his own and does well in the zone game. Here's the thing. I looking at Ashton's film at Boise State and seeing what a lot of runs and saw what the Raiders struggled with last year. It was a trend to get up to the 2nd level to block those linebackers. And so you're going to need good zone blockers. I'm not sure if the Raiders this season are going to have a man scheme or a zone scheme. But with that being said, a lot of offensive linemen and then on my top 3 coming into today and for the remainder of the draft are good zone blockers. The thing I'm looking forward to is whether or not they can hold up against some of the biggest presence of the defensive tackles in this division, because that's the first thing I care about. You want to talk about make the playoffs? You know this, EA. Win your division. Yep. So we got to get there. So I'm looking for day 1 starters. Travis Radledge out of Georgia is a big guard. He's my number 1. And Joshua Gray out of Oregon State is a 5-year starter. Tremendous hands. Will play inside. He won't be a tackle because he struggles in space. Will play inside. Good hands, good size, good at the point of attack. Might need a little help in defining his pass protection game, but I do believe because he has that experience, EA and JT, as a 5-year starter, he would be a good fit there. And then last but not least, it's the young man out of the U of A. Now, Jonah, and I'm having trouble with his last name, so I'm not going to touch it. Pronunciation guy doesn't come up. But if Jonah's probably going to be the first offensive lineman taken in day 2, and there are a few teams that might make a play for him, he is another solid player. So I'm looking to day 1 starters, and I'm looking to immediate impact when it comes to interior offensive linemen.
Lincoln Kennedy joins us. So 2 things you said concern me. First off, scheme changes. You played a long time in this league, multiple Pro Bowl. And my first part of the question is, how many scheme changes did you go through in your great career? Because you're playing with Colt Miller and Jackson Powers Johnson. And could there be a change in zone blocking back to a different scheme? Could there be a massive change in philosophy here?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's a massive change in philosophy, but there might be a slight change.
Okay.
Case in point, we had the conversation yesterday. EA had asked about some of the running backs that I played with and performed for, and Tyrone was more of a downhill man blocking. So we had schemes of Zach Crockett, those types of guys. We had schemes in effect for them, straight downhill. When it came to Napoleon Kaufman and a lot of Charlie Garner's plays under Gruden's time, there were a lot of zone schemes that we used because you get them out in space and they're able to work. With that being said, you got to make sure you have capable offensive linemen that can get onto that second level. So it was a mix. I actually prefer man blocking. I prefer to go downhill rather than side to side and try to reach guys. But there are more offenses that are going with zone blocking because they don't necessarily have the time to commit to how to best run block downhill man blocking schemes.
Well, my follow-up quickly is simply this. Then you said 8 offensive linemen gone on day one. That's concerning to me because then you're talking about an offensive lineman that won't start or will compete or, this guy, I thought, whoever it is, has got to be a day one starter, not the 9th or 10th or 11th best offensive lineman in the draft. If he comes in here, then we're talking about throwing him in the fire with DJ Glaze, competition Pete and all that. I get that, but wouldn't you want a guy this early still in the second round that you could say he's going to start?
And that's why I started with the top 2 guards, interior linemen, Tate Ratledge as well as Joshua Gray. I believe they are day one starters. And the thing is that there were teams, JT and EA, in my opinion, that overreached on offensive line in the first round. Didn't have to make some of the complications that made it way more complicated than they had to. And there's a stretch there. So I think there were teams that were desperate. But it just goes back to my original point of yesterday. When you have 8 teams that draft in the first round offensive linemen, how much of an emphasis it should be.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just going to stay on offensive line for just one more, Link. Okay. Now, think about Chip Kelly in Oregon early on with James, LaMichael James, and those guys. I thought that was more of a zone scheme. Yes. Ohio State last year, was that kind of a man scheme?
You remember Chip Kelly in his days back in Oregon, he liked to go sideline to sideline.
Yes.
He had a lot of extended perimeter runs.
Right.
That was a zone scheme.
Yeah.
But when you look at that offensive line that he had at Ohio State last year, those big boys were coming straight downhill.
Okay.
That was a man blocking scheme.
Okay.
That opened up a lot of things with the play action. Still wants to run the ball, still has ability to call combo offenses, but most part, it just depends on the personnel. And that to me is premier coaching.
All right, let's go to defensive backs. I think that's a big need. Will Johnson dropped really far. Dropping that far, I don't know if it's worth trading up the way a couple of years ago they did with Michael Mayer to go up and say, hey, we got our guy. I love this part of the draft. If you got your guy and you went to bed last night and you're John Spytek and said, we have to get that guy. A lot of times GMs want to trade up and get him. They don't want to mess around. They want to trade up and get him because he might not be there. Will Johnson out of Michigan, Tom Brady, John Spytek, Michigan men. This is a guy I saw in some mocks going in the top 10 to top 15 on most of them, and he's still out there available. There's some good players right there, Link.
Still good players, and some of them have injury issues that I'm concerned about. I wouldn't want to take risk taking a player that had some injury issues towards the end of his season, his last season in college football, whether or not they're ready to go, because you don't want to have another, Tyrese Wilson incident that we had a couple years ago where you had to put him on the back burner, when you drafted high. So I don't necessarily think you need to trade up. But there are some guys that stand out to me, guys, and I'm going to go from 1 to 3. First one is Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame. I think this is a hybrid guy who can play well in space. When I think about what the Raiders need as far as defensive backs, I'm saying you got to replace Nate Hobbs. You got to replace Merrick. You need guys that can play in space. And whether you want to do and you know this, EA, a 2 or a 3 safety scheme like Merrick did last year, he was almost like a Bumble type of strong safety, a hybrid of between a corner, a strong safety, and a nickel back. So we got to replace the nickel back, and we got to replace a safety in instance. And it just gives you options if you're Patrick Graham. Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame is first and foremost to me. And then Azari Thomas out of FSU.
Yeah.
Good at changing direction, good at rerouting receivers. A little bit undersized, need to put on a weight, but I think he's good in space. Might be a good slot corner to replace Nate Hobbs. He's a good tackler around the ball. And then last but not least, another guy in the Notre Dame is Xavier Watts. Safety / dime back, partially corner, can play well in space, might give you that Merrick effect that you had last year with the defense.
Yeah, I understand all those, Link, and we've been talking about this all day today. Is I think the one thing that kind of, when you talk about this new regime, is size, particularly on defense in the middle of the football field. They want size in the middle of the football field, even if you're a dime guy, a nickel guy. They need you to be a 6'2", 6'3", 6'4" type of football player that you can go from, you know, one high safety, roll yourself down in the box, have some athleticism, have some ability to maybe cover a tight end or so. So I think that's going to be a really big factor in who we choose at defensive back if you don't go Will Johnson. And the only thing I would say in defense, I guess, of Will is, unlike a lot of the other players that are drafted and may have an injury, if you go back and watch his 2022, 2023 tape, the guy's phenomenal. I mean, he's one of the best. He's one of the best corners in the nation, right?
No doubt.
And he just didn't play with his physical traits. You saw a lot of processing, setting things up, very cerebral player. So for that stance, you know, at number 2 or number 3 or wherever we can pick him, if you get a guy like that, he's able to provide that great value because you know he's going to work hard and get back to where he was.
There's no doubt about what you're pointing. Just to add on a little bit of caveat before we move on, look, I think there are going to be other teams that are going to try to make a play for him.
Yes.
In the second round. I think it's a tremendous value pick, much on what you're saying, the potential and the opportunity there. And he's projected to be in the first round. So this would be a great value pick. But I think there's going to be I don't know if the price is worth paying to get up, to trade up, to make sure that you get that pick. That's it. Well, that's my counterpoint.
All right, Lincoln, wide receivers, the top 3. You got a few of them here. This is important right now. This is really important the way I look at it personally. I don't know who's going to be there, but to get a starting wide receiver with Ashton Genty, boom, boom, we got it. So the defense we know is good with Max, Wilkins, Kuntz, everybody we got, and it's going to get better. But you get the wide receiver and you get out of here with Ashton Genty before you get to the third round. I'm a big believer in that because I think the wide receiver drop-off will be more significant than the running backs, where we got deep running backs all the way into the 6th round.
What I'm looking for are good route runners, and that can separate and change the defense, the complexity of the defense. 3 names that stand out to me. First and foremost is Jalen Royals, Utah State, 6-foot receiver, 200 pounds. Good route runner, good separation at the top of his route, and more importantly, and the most important, because I see a lot of teams that are playing zone, knowing how to get open in zones. Knowing a receiver knows how to run routes versus zones. So Jalen Royals stands out to me at Utah State. Next, I like Kyle Williams out of FSU. I had a chance to watch this young man when I was covering the Pac-12, watch him play a number of games of football. Thought he was a good route runner, good solid route runner, and has that 4.4 speed that can take the top off of a defense, which you want on that second and intermediate level as you're trying to get Bowers and your other underneath receivers open. You want somebody to be able to keep that safety occupied. So Kyle Williams comes in second. And last is Tay Fulton out of Maryland, 6'1", a 6'1" receiver, good top end speed, knows how to create separation with his hands and being physical, which is something if you're going to play against corners that are more press conscientious or more press heavy, that'll be good in space.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the areas of the football field that my partner here, JT, is always talking about is the red zone. Throw the ball in the end zone. That's the type of receiver I think we need at this point. Someone who's going to be able to high point the ball, knowing that we have someone like Brock Bowers and Jacoby who can kind of control the middle of the football field. I think having a guy that can kind of blow the top off of the defense, take advantage of that play-action pass and all the things that hopefully are going to go well with the running game, you need that number 1 receiver is going to be able to be on the outside and make plays from the outside part of the football field. Yep.
And JT and EA, we've seen this before. When the space condenses, a lot more defenses are going to more zone-heavy defenses to try to take up that space. Having good route runners becomes imperative. I mean, it has to happen. You got to have guys who know how to get open, who know how to work with the scheme of things, and aren't just running across the field with their arm up saying that they're open. They got to know how to get open and work in space.
Well, Lincoln, there's a lot of playmakers here on offense now with Brock and Ashton. I'm assuming he's going to be a great playmaker. Jacoby Myers, as I talked to Gino backstage last night, and Gino's back there, and I'm like, what do you think of a guy 1,000 yards? and doesn't drop the ball. And he just started laughing. He goes, wow, I can't wait to get to work with him. But as we show this graphic, and for those who are just listening only, it's Geno, Ashton Genty, Brock Bowers, Jacoby Myers. That's 4 out of 11 starters on the field. Now, we know we got 5 offensive linemen. That takes us right up to 9. So I don't think there's a lot left. I don't think you looking at a team. Now, depth is an issue, Lincoln, but this new look offense with Ashton Genty and Brock Bowers, that's exciting the Raider Nation.
Well, that's why it's imperative to get that offensive lineman in early because, look, you need to hold up at the point. And much to people have talked about, Geno Smith had success in Seattle, but there were a lot of times where he's running for his life. You don't need that. And so you got to have guys that I think you want to try to take in this day 2, second and third round picks. You want to try to take the top off and make that starter, to make that additional playmaker to hold up at the point. You got to have protection.
Yeah. All right, Link, I got to follow up with this because we are obviously live. Ian Rappaport now saying if the Raiders don't take Shedeur Sanders, the Raiders, there could be a drop-off for Shedeur. Okay, so that's Ian Rappaport saying the Raiders, Shedeur Sanders, if not, he could drop from there. Chris Trapasso, one of the best at CBS Sports mock drafts, have the Raiders in the second round taking Shedeur. So we're going to cover this because I don't think they're going to take him. I don't think it's a need. We got Geno, we got Aiden, but there's a lot of people in Green Bay. There's a lot of people there covering the draft there that are chirping about Shedeur going early. And one of the only teams that is a need, they thought, would be the Raiders. Yeah. Where do you stand with that about 20 minutes out?
Well, here's my thing. And when it comes to Shedeur, I don't want a pick to be a distraction. I've never given so much credence to rookies. Because I've seen guys that look like Tarzan play like Jane. They got to come in and earn it, okay? And when you use high picks, especially when you use first rounds, I think teams feel the pressure to start that player. That's the reason why you draft in the first round. Yes, you get better value when you draft in second or third rounds. And yes, I think the Raiders are eventually going to have to address the quarterback situation. But you don't want a player to be in a distraction when you're a team struggling to see awareness, to show what it looks like, to show all of its glow. You don't need a distraction or a discomfort in the locker room.
Link, with this football team and how it's designed, with Max Crosby, with Pete Carroll as the head coach, Tom Brady on the staff, the brand of the Raiders, I'm not even sure if Shedeur could kind of come here and disrupt what's going on here. I don't think that's going to be an issue if Shedeur comes here to Las Vegas.
Here's my thing, EA. Here's my thing. Do the Raiders have an identity right now? They are a defensive football team.
Yes.
That's their identity. They lost some pieces. They've got to restock, okay? Offensively, we have no identity. We didn't do anything last year.
Right.
You see what I mean? They had trouble moving the football. You're in the basement looking up. You're looking up at the 3 teams. You no longer have the advantage of Denver. They're getting better. So now you've got to find a way that you can compete. The last thing you need is a distraction where somebody doesn't want to come to work, somebody doesn't want to show up. And I'm only saying this. I'm not saying that Shedeur is that type of player. Yeah. I'm not saying that. I talked with Dion many times. I think he's going to be a good pro. Mm-hmm. My thing is this. You don't need a distraction coming in the locker room where a reporter comes and say, well, Geno struggled last night against the Broncos. Do you think Shedeur start? You and I have been in locker rooms, heard that.
Yeah. That's going to be anywhere,
We've heard
though.
That.
That's going to be anywhere.
It can definitely be anywhere. No doubt.
Let me throw this caveat in. I would agree with that yesterday. He got dropped to the second round. Now you have the ability to say you're not playing. First round's a different story. Geno throws a pick 6. The fans are going, get Shedeur in. Now he drops to the second round. And again, I don't think he's going to go to the Raiders. I can't see how Pittsburgh doesn't take him.
Right.
This is a really big developing story. And EA, what also is developing is you better keep an eye on your job there. This guy's doing DB breakdowns.
I know.
You see those DB breakdowns? You see those
I want
DB
no parts of
breakdowns?
that. I want no parts of that. No. That's
I got to get my offensive line game together.
I want no parts of that.
Yeah, you imagine Lincoln getting called in every week to do D-back breakdown. Lincoln, be well. Good to talk to you, my friend.
Way to go, buddy.
All right, brothers. I'll talk to you soon. Be well.
Always so good. Yeah. Always fantastic. The great Lincoln Kennedy. Paul Gutierrez will join us again. He kicked off the show. We'll get any news coming from Paul as he's right outside the war room, and he'll join us as we're excited. It's our pre-draft show, day 2, as we're wrapping it up, brought to you by America First Credit Union.
Tim Brown, Heisman Trophy winner in '87 at Notre Dame.
To be drafted by the Raiders, it was the best thing that could have happened to me. was in my little apartment in South Bend. That was before they started bringing guys to New York. It was Ron Wolf who called me, and I remember him saying, "Do you want to be a Raider?" And I started screaming like a little girl. It was on TV. I got the call right before the Raiders pick, and so I got to hear them say Tim Brown. It was quite different than today. So much fanfare that goes along with the draft, but not so much back then. So it was a phone call, they made the announcement, and then the next team was on the clock. I told my agent, look, man, I didn't know if I could come in and learn the receiver position that quick to be able to make a difference. We got to the Raiders, we said, okay, James Lofton, Mervin Fernandez, Marcus Allen, Bo Jackson, Todd Christensen. If we can get here, they're obviously not going to need me day one, and that'll give me a chance to learn this position and be ready to play. You literally almost have to pinch yourself sometimes. To be in the locker room with Howie Long, with Todd, and with Marcus, it was really a little freaky because you watch these guys for years play at such a high level, and all of a sudden you're there in the locker room, and guess what? They're expecting you to meet that or better it. And even though I didn't feel a lot of pressure at the same time, I wanted to get better. I'm forever grateful for the Raiders organization, and certainly for Mr. Davis for giving me a shot to be a Raider.
Back at it. Bright and early. What time is it? 5:40? Come on, that.
With the 100th pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Las Vegas Raiders select Trey Tucker, wide receiver, Cincinnati.
I was in my room, threw the phone in there, grabbed a snack, and walked out to the bathroom. And like I said, this phone, if it was ringing, it could only be a team. So when it rang, I think I darted through my door. Actually, the door in my room broke because I had the knob, and I shut it, and I darted in there and looked at the phone, and it literally, it said Raiders football. It didn't say Las Vegas, it said Raiders football. So right then and there, it was like, the Raiders, Raiders football. And like I said, I probably answered the phone quicker than anybody could, so, but that was what that moment was like.
Open man at the 20 is Tucker, into the 10, dives to the pylon, touchdown Raiders! Throwing, there's a wide open man in the end zone, back pylon, touchdown Raiders!
Something I'll never forget, and I still have the screenshot of when the Raiders called me on draft day, and someday I'm gonna try to get that picture and blow it up, and it'll never be forgotten.
I do. I mean, Brock obviously had a fantastic rookie season, and Jacoby's is a great slot player for us, and had his best season in the NFL last year too. And now we add another dynamic weapon to it with Ashton. We like our offensive line and how it's coming together. So, and then obviously putting a quarterback back there that can lead and rally the guys and play tough and make good decisions, and then throw the ball really to all levels of the field. I feel like I think Coach does too, and Chip does too. We've gotten harder to defend, but we still have 2 more days of the draft and undrafted free agency, and there's always players that pop later too. So our work is not even close to being done, but I think we're off to a good start, and tonight certainly was a big boost to that.
I think too that we're trying to set this up so that our staff and Chip and the coaches that are on the offensive side have the opportunities to create all of the things that they know are capable to be created. And I'm fired up for Chip. I know he knows it. He could see in the mini camp we just had that we've got some stuff that we can work with, and so we're looking forward to it.
Welcome back to our pre-draft show. That was a great soundbite from the press conference because what Coach Carroll said is, want to see, give them more weapons, give them more opportunity here. JT along with Eric Allen, Paul Gutierrez coming up here. Before we bring Paul in, Adam Schefter saying players available on Friday nights, round 2 and 3 include Shedeur, Jalen Milroe, Luther Burden III, Jaden Wiggins, Kyle Williams, and he goes down the list. Remember the 2 Ohio State running backs, Travion Henderson and Quinshon Junkins, both available. Mike Green, the best defensive end, and Carson Schlesinger. We talked about the linebacker out of UCLA as we bring in Paul Gutierrez. There's a lot of players still available here, and the Raiders pick high, Paul, coming up here in the second round. What are you sensing? What are you hearing?
Yeah, I tell you what's interesting in talking with some people in the building here is obviously the Cleveland Browns are going to control this with 2 picks here before the Raiders even get on the clock. You know, that's barring any trades up or trades down. But what I was told, which I thought was very interesting, was keep an eye on the quarterback situation. Now, when I kind of pushed back, I mean, does that mean that the Raiders are actually going to make that selection here after using the first round on Ashton Jeanty? The source kind of went back and said, well, it doesn't really make much sense, does it? But to keep an eye on it because things are so fluid. And when you're talking about the quarterbacks that are out there, obviously the big name is Shedeur Sanders. You got Milroe out there as well. One, if not both of them, will be available when the Raiders selection comes up. So, again, being told to keep an eye on that, take that for what that's worth. But other than that is the national narrative going into the second and third rounds.
Yeah, Shedeur has been kind of linked to the Raiders from almost, his senior year. And, his relationship with Tom Brady. And I keep going back to he's going to be a good player. I thought he was a type of player who's ready to play right away. Since we got Geno, it's maybe an opportunity maybe for him to sit and learn from Geno. What's kind of the process of why Shedeur is still there?
Yeah, what I keep hearing and what's being reported throughout the league is that potentially it's not so much the negative reports that have come out on him this week, especially from the anonymous, unnamed coaches throughout the league that have been taking shots at him, because you have to really kind of remove the media aspect of it from it. Okay. Teams spend hundreds of thousands of dollars investigating these guys. You have private security firms investigating background checks on these guys. So if it's sliding, it's not because of one report or one coach saying this, that, and the other. It's simply because teams didn't think highly enough of him to put a first-round grade on him. Now, when it comes to the Raiders, you're right. There is that connection that goes way back to Tom Brady, and whether he wants to make that move or not, we're going to find out here soon enough. But it just doesn't really make a lot of sense, like somebody told me earlier today, to get a quarterback this high. Again, the name that I always keep looking at is Will Howard later on, potentially tomorrow, because of that connection with Chip Kelly from Ohio State.
Paul, one more thing on Ian Rappaport, and the tweet is up here on our screen for our viewers, for our listeners. Shedeur has better possibility to fall to the third round now if the Raiders pass on him. And I never thought he was going to be a Raider. Didn't think in the first round. I thought the pick was too high. In the second round, okay, it's worth talking about because he's there, but I want a starter, not a guy who's going to be a third stringer. He would not be the second string quarterback. He would be the third behind Aiden O'Connell, and I don't think the team wants to do that if they want to win now. But I personally believe, and I'm going to put my name on it, this kid is getting the raw end of the deal. Nothing changed in a week. Everybody was up in Boulder, and they went to his workout, and it went really well. The Giants flew back there with 9 people on the private jet to see him again. He practiced well. This kid is getting trolled in social media now. He has not changed in 24, 48 hours. He's a good kid. He's the same quarterback he was 4 days ago, 8 days ago, a month ago. But this is what happens, Paul, in the draft. One thing changes, one GM, one rumor, and all of a sudden the guy plummets.
Yeah, and beyond that, like I said earlier, the only other explanation is that you had a lot of teams that didn't have high grade on him to begin with. And then you're looking now that you get into the draft, the second, third round, when guys start to quote-unquote slip, it's simply because you're looking at a guy with that much of a social media personality, that much of an overall personality, that do you want to bring in somebody that's not going to be your starter? Because once you get this late in the draft, if you're drafting a quarterback this late, you already, in your own mind, have your starter is already entrenched. So now you start weighing that against other things and checking off other boxes throughout your roster. So there's that going on. There's also the reports that are going on. But believe me, teams have already done their due diligence, whether or not they want to make that choice or not. It's unfortunate. You kind of, from one point of view, you feel for him. You feel for him because his name is being slandered out there, and yet this is the name of the game. And again, that movie was so bad, it was good. And I guess, Eric, you could speak to it better. The movie Draft Day, I mean, it was so bad, it was good to me because nobody went to Shador's 21st birthday party? Is that what's happening here? I don't know.
Right, I hear you. Now, another quarterback that, we heard so much of early on in the process about his skill set and things that you could measure was Jalen Milroe.
Yeah.
And we haven't heard anything about Milroe. I understand he's a project. I understand that, he has difficulties maybe with the intermediate game. We know he has an incredible skill set. I mean, just an incredible skill set and has an amazing deep ball. Last year, Alabama didn't have the type of receivers it has had in the past, but this guy has been a winner at the highest level, and he is just an incredible athlete. Why do you think we haven't been hearing a lot about Milroe?
Interesting, because coming into the week of the draft, you heard a lot of things that he could potentially slide all the way up into the first round. And the fact that he's still there, it's going to be interesting to see what Cleveland does, because they don't have a quarterback, really, if you think about it. And they have those 2 picks in the first 5 of this second round coming up here. So from what I've been told here with the Raiders in terms of how he could potentially fit, again, kind of a shot, maybe not a shot, but it's like, well, the Raiders already drafted a running back. Why would they need Milroe as a quarterback? But it makes more sense to get him later on, because if he is more of a project, you want that project to be taken later in the draft. You don't want to use a second rounder or a third rounder on somebody that's not going to see the field, especially when you have Geno and you already have Aiden O'Connell as well in that quarterback room. So, again, a lot of hurry up, wait, and see.
Yeah, Paul Gutierrez is our guest. I love Milroe. The same thing. If you said third round, I knew Jackson Dart was going in the first round for 2 months. Everybody was leaning towards that. Someone's going to take Dart. Giants come back up. I think what's going to happen somewhere in the second round, the team is going to trade up for him instead of wait for him. That's the compliment that I would have given Shador today. If Shador isn't the first pick of the second round or one of the first, I would think a whole bunch of teams would go, wow, he cleared the first 6 picks. He got past the Raiders. Let's go get him and go trade up and do it. And that's what I think is going to be interesting with Jalen Milroe, because his comp is Lamar Jackson. And it's really similar.
It's close.
Other than the fact that Lamar won the Heisman. Let's remember, he won the Heisman, but their skill set, Alabama compared to Louisville. So I'm excited to see what's going to happen. It's going to be hard, Paul, to top last night, because Travis Hunter went to Jacksonville. And there's 1,000 mock drafts, maybe 1,010, and not one person had that. And it goes to show you the best insiders in the world didn't see the number 2 pick in the draft come through. So maybe, Paul, we get a surprise tonight early.
Yeah, it's almost like if you try to mock out the second or the third round, or maybe even day 3, it's kind of like, putting yourself out there and doing a pool for the NIT tournament instead of the big dance, because you just don't know, and it's so much fun, and there's so many unknown variables when it comes to these later rounds. But like we said earlier, this is where the draft actually gets going. This is where the grunt work happens. This is where the roster is built out. So when you see here the Browns control the start of the second round, and if Shador Sanders is one of their selections, okay, now we can move on and we can figure out exactly what teams are going to do from there. From the Raider perspective, they still need to check that box of receiver, cornerback, receiver, linebacker. The UCLA linebacker seems to be rising up that chart a little bit. And if they want to get more picks, they got to trade back up into the second or third round to do that as well. So they have a little bit of capital in day 3, and maybe they were able to get back up into it here on day 2.
So those are your prospects, your top prospects. Let's go, your top 10 prospects left on the board right now.
For me right now, there's so many names out there. I'll throw the schools out there. I'll say the Michigan cornerback, the Missouri receiver, Shador Sanders, obviously, as a quarterback. Not sure if he fits here or not, but yeah, I'll agree exactly with Daniel Jeremiah, because it's so many names that are out there. I do like Carson Schweisinger is really appealing to me, and yet the Raiders already have a linebacker at middle linebacker that they drafted last year too, out of Ohio State. So I don't know that you can really say, okay, we don't need to draft that because we already have that position. We saw how that worked out last year. They already had a tight end. They got an all-timer, at least for a rookie last year in Brock Bowers. So,
but, hey, you know what, Paul? Mike Green from Marshall, I think he led the nation in sacks. And whenever if you can rush the pass rush, if you can rush the quarterback, you have to have some kind of positive, draft experience. And I'm not sure why he's fallen, but he's a guy who continues just to be on the big board.
Yeah, and again, from a smaller school, right? And where did Malcolm Kuntz come from? Buffalo.
Yes. Yep.
Where did Khalil Mack come from? Buffalo. Where did Max Crosby come from?
Yeah.
The smaller school. And that was the one thing that I remember at the time when the Raiders drafted Max Crosby, talking to the GM at the time, Mike Mayock, and he made that comparison to Ted Hendricks. And I remember talking to the Raiders owner, Mark Davis, who said if he ever had a chance to build a team on his own, he would start with Ted Hendricks. He said his only concern with Max at that time was the level of competition, because he was coming from the MAC. He was coming from Eastern Michigan. Those things all get thrown out the window. If you have the talent, you have the skill, and beyond that, the desire and the coaching, then now you're cooking with grease.
Thanks, Paul. We'll look for your
right.
social media when you get the news and your interviews after the picks. Thank you.
Sounds good, guys. Take care.
There's Paul Gutierrez now with the Raiders here in-house, which is fantastic. I believe the Raiders should take a wide receiver if the best wide receiver's available. There's a couple we went over. I also like linebacker, except Will Johnson. Just got to find out what's happening with him.
Yeah, got to find out.
I'm going to assume he's going to be healthy. I'm sticking with what we said. I want a starter.
Yes.
I don't want a guy. If it's the 12th best offensive lineman, I don't know what that means. He's going to compete against DJ Glaze.
Right.
Jackson Powers Johnson competing or starting is what I want to say.
Yeah, so that would go along with the receiver or that safety who's going to be the nickel, kind of guy who, because we play with, dime nickel personnel all the time anyway, So I agree with you. I think receiver or some kind of defensive back who's going to be on the football field, playing significant minutes every single game.
You ready to go?
Let's go, man.
Let's do this. It was a different atmosphere today. This was a really special day for what we were able to tell you we saw in the building. From Freddie B to Marcus to Jim Plunkett to Ashton here, the vibe in the building, the staff, everybody meeting Ashton in the lobby. Yeah. It's always special when you catch one of those days and you see that.
JT, the last 2 years, we've been fortunate enough to be able to sit down and speak with both draft picks, and both the guys are phenomenal human beings. And Austin was just great today. So I'm really excited about him coming up next year.
We're all excited because we have the Hall of Famer here, and we're counting down to his great summer, but we're counting down right now to the draft in Green Bay for round 2 and 3, and keep it here on all the Raider platforms. It's going to be an exciting night, everyone.